Hello, welcome back to Steins Gate 0. We're in an alternate world line now. We stopped in front of the gate. Several US soldiers had evidently been waiting for my arrival.
君をアメリカに渡したら、もう我々のところには正しい情報なんて一つも降りてこなくなるだろう。だから、これが最後の機会だ。
Shimoyama turned around from the front passenger seat and looked straight at me. His eyes were desperate and begging.
教えてくれ。我々はこの先どうすればいいんだ。頼む。
I remembered all the soldiers in Tokyo who'd fought so desperately to protect me. Were they fighting to help someone else in Tokyo right now, or were they already...
俺には分かりません。
岡部君。
本当に分からないんです。俺一人の力でこの戦争をどうにかできると思いますか？ゴリバチョフやレリツィンがロシアの大統領になるとか、東西冷戦を劇的に終結させるとか、そんな歴史を知っていたところでどうにもならない。
I hear the sound of another car getting closer. Shimoyama sighed and opened the passenger side door. I exited the car as I was told. Here he got out of the van behind us and ran over. My childhood friend flung herself into my arms and I held her tight. I could feel her warmth. Mary was here. I'd never gone almost a whole month without seeing her before. And this was wartime. I couldn't easily contact her like I could in the old Worldline. So I'd been so worried about whether or not Mary was okay. It was no exaggeration to say that I'd survived this far just to make sure. I'd erased the entire Alpha Worldline to save her. No matter what happened, I wanted her to be safe. Oh. And it must be so good to see her after all the painting with her. I held her too closely in Steins Gate. I took a step back. Oh, I heard two more voices I recognized, Ferris and Luca, and behind them I saw Kaid.
よく無事で。
岡部さん、
ルカ子。
I felt myself getting choked up too when I saw Lukako cry. I exchanged greetings with Kaid too. Fubuki had grabbed onto her like a little kid. She was still pale and trembling.
フェリス。さすがにメイド服じゃないんだな。
フェリスって呼ばれたのも久しぶりにゃ。
Harris spoke sadly. Then she put her hand around my neck and held me close. Her little pink lips got close to my ear, as if she was about to kiss me.
おい。
What was going on?
照れることないにゃ。
She laughed mischievously. Then Ferris, no, Rumio Akia, whispered into my ear while pretending to kiss me.
気をつけて。防衛省の人も米軍の人も信用してはダメ。大人は嘘だらけ。みんな本当のことを言わないわ。
That's right. Ferris had a special talent, Cheshire Break. She was incredibly good at looking into someone's heart and seeing what they were thinking.
思い知ったよ。
One of them just tricked me. Ferris looked surprised and took a step back.
悲しいにゃ。
そうだな。
And then I heard the sound of another engine. This time it was coming from beyond the gate and inside the base. It belonged to a black luxury car with an E on the license plate. Behind it was a minibus. The two of them stopped in front of the gate. It was time for my reunion to end.
Welcome!
An American soldier as tall as a basketball player got out of the car.
ようこそ皆さん。私ハモンドです。歓迎します。
His Japanese was good, but not great.
では、ミスター岡部以外の皆さんはバスに乗ってください。
He was smiling, but I could tell he wasn't going to allow any arguments. And the other American soldiers were still carrying their rifles as they stood guard without smiles. Shimiyama and the other Japanese soldiers were watching us from a distance. They didn't try to stop us. They were just looking downwards.
オカリン以外ってどういうこと？
怖がらなくていいです。皆さんには少し話を聞かせてもらいます。でも後ですぐに沖縄防衛局へ送ります。さあ、どうぞ。
オカリン、
大丈夫だ。安心しろ。
でも
ユキさん、参りを頼みます。
はい。
Yuki nodded and put her arm around Mayuri's shoulder as she led her to the bus. Everyone else followed.
オカリン、
俺の両親によろしく言っておいてくれ。
Once everyone but me was on, the minibus left immediately. The area in front of the gate fell silent. It was hard to believe this existed in the same world as all the places I'd crossed on my escape through Japan's main island.
さて、それではミスター岡部、あなたはどうぞこちらの車へ。
He told me to get in the back seat of the black luxury car. What would happen to me once I got inside? I tried to think about it, but I realized there was nothing I could do. I was just about to get into the car when... Sumiyama's scream was cut off by the sound of gunfire. In the corner of my eye, I saw the American soldiers firing without hesitation. No way. I tried to turn around when... A large hand blocked my vision as Hammond held me down. I couldn't hear Shimoyama's voice anymore. Through the gaps between his fingers, I could see that nothing was moving, and I knew exactly what that meant. I was shoved into the car before I had time to think about it. I tried to open my mouth, but Hammond looked into my eyes and shook his head. I wasn't supposed to talk then. Hammond sat next to me, then closed the door. The car started to move. Soon, we turned down a different road than the one the minibus was taking. America, huh? I'd never been there before. What were they going to do to me there? Use me as a guinea pig? Cut open my head and dissect my brain? I probably was going to do any too worse things. I felt like screaming, but tried my best to stay calm. Hammond suddenly spoke, then he handed me something. I took it before I even looked at it what it was. When I checked, it was a normal smartphone. Confused, I pressed the button as I was told, and then something appeared on the screen. It was the Amadeus Kurisu Makise. I was about to ask Hammond when, for the first time in about a month, that feeling came back. The whole world and all its colors began to shift. There was a feeling of instability, like my brain was unable to recognize where it was, and then dizziness and a sense of falling, like you get when you're anemic. I could hear the blood vessels deep within my ears, and they sounded really loud. The sense of floating finally stopped, and my surroundings coalesced into firm shapes. Mayuri was in front of me. I was in the lab, in the room I knew well. There was no trace of Okinawa anywhere. I realized that I was staring at Mayuri. I looked around the room. Daru was sitting in front of the PC like always, hunched over with his back towards me. Suzuha was reading a magazine on the couch. On the open page, I could read the title, New Encephalitis Strikes Worldwide. Are you in danger? The same couch, the same cheap fridge, the artist's computer desk, the dirty curtain that cut off the development room from the rest of the lab. The wall clock, which I'd picked up out of a garbage dump, told me it was past 6. I looked at the calendar, and 2010 was already gone. It was January 2011. The Worldline had changed again. I was back to the old Worldline.
No. Mayuri. ここって秋葉原だよな。違うのか。
よ。
今日って何日だっけ？
21日。
ゴリバチョフ知ってるか？
ゴリバチョフ？どこかで聞いたことがあるような。
ペレストロイカっしょ。恐ろしや。あ、でもゴリビーってソ連時代だっけ？やっぱロシアといえばプーシンっしょ。目の前で睨まれたらしょんべんちびる自信あるね。
プーシンさんなら知ってるよ。ロシアの大統領さんだよね。実はワンコが好きなんだよ。秋田犬を飼ってるんだって。ニュースでやってた。
大統領。そうだ。大統領だ。
Mary, Daru, and Suzuha all looked over at me suspiciously. It felt like a long time since anyone had looked at me that way. I was back. I no longer had to worry that I might be killed at any second. I felt incredibly relieved, but at the same time, I wondered, why had the Worldline changed again? I needed to calm down and think for a bit. I went up to the roof and booted up the web browser on my smartphone. Unlike during wartime, it connected immediately. I was amazed at the speed. Just getting an internet connection in the last Worldline had been difficult enough. I started by searching for Gorbachev, and the results came back instantly. Perestroika, the Soviet Union's first and last president, the August coup d'etat, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. All the keywords I hoped to see were there. As soon as I confirmed that the Soviet Union was dismantled at the end of the 20th century and no longer existed, I closed the browser. Then why had the Worldline shifted again? I hadn't done anything. I didn't have any way to affect the divergence value. So what had changed it? Had whoever had performed the first experiment in Russia undone it? Had they watched its progress for a month and then been satisfied? Were they going to keep doing it? And if they did, would I be caught up in it each time? It was a mistake to come outside without a coat on. Nothing I could come up with by myself would be anything more than a guess. I went back to the lab. The wreaths we'd put up at the entrance for the Christmas party were still up.
Christmas party.
It had only been a month, hadn't it? It felt like a million years ago. I had no memories of what I'd done in this Worldline after the Christmas party.
ああ、そういえば飾り付け放置したまんまだっけ？いい加減外さないとな。パーティーの時にオカリンと吹雪氏が倒れたっしょ？それでバタバタしちゃってちゃんと片付けできてないんだよね。
俺と中瀬さんが倒れた。
Was that when the Worldline changed? Everyone remembered that I collapsed at the Christmas party, which means I'd come back to the same Worldline as the one I'd been in before. If this was Russia's doing, it was terrifying to think they could control the Worldline to that degree. And there was one more thing. It worried me that Fubuki had collapsed too. I stood there, lost in thought. Daru and Mayuri looked a little concerned.
そういえば中瀬さんの具合はどうなのかなって思ってな。
I quickly came up with an excuse.
ふぶきちゃん、まだ入院してるんだ。
入院？もう1ヶ月近く経ってるのにか？
本人は大丈夫だって言ってるんだけど、ちっとも退院させてもらえないんだって。
I've heard that lately. Unless you were really, really sick, they wouldn't let you stay in the hospital for very long. Was Fubuki sick with something?
これの疑いが晴れないらしいね。
Suzuha whispered as she held up the page of the magazine she was reading. Yep.
新型脳炎。
I borrowed the magazine. They were talking about this last November. I'd seen a glimpse of it on the news. Outside of Japan, they'd seen almost 100 people, albeit with mild symptoms. In Japan, there were 10 people being kept at hospitals for examinations, or so it said. So it had made its way to Japan, and one of those 10 was Fubuki then? Was it transmissible by air? We didn't catch it at the Christmas party, did we? I knew that getting nervous wouldn't help anything, but still, I wondered.
ねえ、オカリンも。 一度病院で見てもらった方がいいんじゃないかな。あの時のオカリン、吹雪ちゃんよりもっと具合悪そうだったよ。
ああ、考えておくよ。
I gave a half-hearted answer to Mayuri and turned back to the magazine. Strange symptoms being found all over the world. Cause unknown. Sudden memory loss. Memories differ from those of the people around you. Losing all sense of the passage of time. Losing the ability to tell the difference between dreams and reality, and sometimes having waking dreams. The article is filled with things like that. This was like...
まるでリーディングシュタイナーみたいじゃないか。
And it matched exactly with what Shimamiya had told me in the other Worldline.
随分とリアルな夢を見たりするとか、ひどい時には白チュームというのかな。現実と夢の区別がつかなくなることもあると聞いた。中瀬君と非常によく似た白チュームを見る人たちがいる。しかも一人や二人じゃない。
I'd wondered back then if Fubuki possessed reading Steiner too. Maybe the reason she collapsed at the Christmas party wasn't some new disease, but the unexpected activation of reading Steiner. That would mean her diagnosis was wrong. The unnecessary tests and treatments they gave her wouldn't help a bit. It looked like I needed to talk to Fubuki. I ended up going over that day. She was at a large general hospital with a medical student department located in Ochanomizu. It was close enough to Akihabara I could walk, and getting there was easy. Since she might get the wrong idea if I went alone, I encouraged Mayuri to come with me. I hoped it would look like I was only coming as an afterthought. But it ended up being a bigger deal than I expected. When they heard that Mayuri was going, Yuki and Kai decided to come too. Evidently, they'd all been to visit Fubuki several times before, and they knew exactly where she was located. They walked down the halls without hesitation. It was almost 8 when visiting hours ended, so we needed to hurry. But as we passed by a nurse's station, there was a minor commotion. A woman in her late 40s wearing a gray jersey was yelling at the doctors and nurses.
いい加減にしてよ。いつになったら退院できるの？
ですから必要な検査と治療を行った後にですね。
治療なんて何にもしてないじゃない。しかもちょっとした検査のはずがなんで1ヶ月も出られないの？仕事はどうしてくれるの？
落ち着いてください。この病気は未知の部分が多く、十分な検査を行って慎重に治療をしませんと危険なのです。
嘘。テレビじゃそんなに大変な病気じゃないから安心しろみたいに言ってたわよ。
ですからそれは適切な検査と治療を行うことが前提です。先ほども突然のめまいを起こしたと看護師からの報告が来ています。
あれは夕飯が遅いからお腹が空いて貧血になっただけよ。私は元気なの。さっさと退院させて。
The woman was about ready to grab the doctor by the throat. Several female nurses held her back, then dragged her off somewhere with reassuring words.
びっくりしたわ。吹雪ちゃんは大丈夫かな？
The girls hurried even faster down the hallway. Fubuki was in a 4-person room at the very end of the hallway. We hesitantly peeked inside.
この声。
We could hear moaning coming from beyond the curtains surrounding Fubuki's bed. Mayuri went pale and hurriedly ripped them open.
吹雪ちゃん。
Fubuki made a strange noise and spun around as we came in. I looked closer and saw that she was sitting on the bed with her legs crossed, watching a show on the LCD TV attached to it. Her eyes were red and swollen with tears, but given the fact that she had a stick of Pocky in her mouth, she was probably just crying over a soap opera.
あ、え？おお、みんな、また来てくれたんだ。
Fubuki wiped away her tears and welcomed us with her usual smile.
まゆしはドキドキしちゃったよ。吹雪ちゃんが泣いてるって思って。紛らわしいんだから。ごめんごめん。
Even as she apologized, she tossed another chocolate-coated stick into her mouth. Her hair was tied up, and she was wearing some kind of headgear. At first I thought it was just that she was too lazy to do her hair, but evidently not. There were cords coming out of the headgear that were attached to a belt around her waist. Were they monitoring her brainwaves? As unobtrusively as possible, I took a look at the other patients around the room. They were all wearing the same headgear. They may have been giving it to all the encephalitis patients.
ふぶきちゃん、ごめんね。みんなで押しかけちゃって。とんでもない。大歓迎だよ。それに、オカリンさんまで来てくれるとは思わなかった。
Fubuki stared at me intently. She'd never done that before, so I started to wonder if there was something on my face.
俺と同じように倒れたって言うから気になってたんだ。具合は？
全然平気。なんで退院できないのか本当わかんないよ。毎日検査するだけで他には何にもやることないし、退屈で。しかもさ、病室って携帯禁止なんだよね。メールしたくてもロビーまで行かないとダメだし、夜9時になると勝手に消灯されちゃうから深夜アニメも見られないし、もう信じられない。
Her bed was surrounded with portable game consoles, magazines, a miniature DVD player, anything to stave off boredom. And given all the half-empty boxes of snacks, it was hard to believe the disease was as serious as they said on the news.
オカリンさんは大丈夫なの？
ああ、マユリにも言ったが、この通りなんともない。
そっか、よかった。
She seemed truly relieved, but she was still staring at me. And suddenly Kaide started to fidget. Not only that, she blushed, then glanced at me, and then almost started to cry. She was acting really weird.
楓ちゃん？どうかした？
Kaide started fidgeting even more when she realized that everyone was looking at her, but she had no choice but to go over and whisper something in Fubuki's ear.
はあ？ふぶきちゃん、
The other girls tried to quiet Fubuki down. This was a hospital, and there were other patients in the room. We couldn't make a fuss.
だって皆さん、ちょっと聞いてくださいよ。ここにいらっしゃる来島楓さんってば、私とオカリンさんがみんなに隠れてこっそり付き合ってるんじゃないかって疑ってるんですよ。
Now it was our turn to keep from shouting in surprise.
何を言い出すんだ？
だってまゆりちゃんの話だと、今日ふぶきちゃんのお見舞いに行こうと言い出したのってオカリンさんなんですよね。
それはまあそうだが。
There was another reason, but I couldn't say that.
それにさっきからふぶきちゃんとオカリンさん愛おしそうに見つめ合ってるし。愛おしそうに見つめてないから。そうじゃなくて、
Fubuki tried to scratch her hair, but the headgear blocked her way and she gave up.
ちょっとリアルな夢をね、見ちゃって。
リアルな夢？
I was startled. That may have been what I wanted to find out.
今日の夕方くらいかな。少しうとうとしてたんだ。やることもないし暇すぎちゃって。そしたらなんかね、あんまり詳しくは覚えてないんだけど、私とオカリンさんとユキさんが怖い人に車に乗せられてどこかへ連れて行かれる夢を見ちゃったんだ。私も出てくるの？うん。
It was the same. That meant Fubuki had experienced the same things I'd gone through in the other Worldline. And this evening would have been the same time I was experiencing it. I peeked through the curtains to make sure that none of the hospital staff were around.
みんな悪いが中瀬さんと二人で話をさせてくれないか？
まさ
か違うって。
I wasn't really sure how to handle that reaction.
それはマユシーたちには聞かれたくないこと？
病気のことについてなんだ。
わかった。
Harry nodded and went outside the curtains. The other two looked bothered, but they followed her.
中瀬さん、君の話した夢なんだが。 もしかして場所は沖縄じゃなかったか？
そうだね。うん、多分沖縄だったと思う。車に乗ってる時にそういう看板を見た気がする。
車に乗ってたのは俺と君、そしてユキさん、他に運転手と背の低い自衛隊の男。
うん。
男の名前は下山。
Fubuki suddenly went pale. A dream about being in a car in Okinawa could be written off as a coincidence, but knowing the exact name of the man in that shared dream was a different matter entirely.
どうして？
その男は君に白チュームの話をした。ロシアの大統領の話も。そして、俺たちは米軍基地に連れて行かれた。そこでマユリたちと合流して俺とは別れた。
Fubuki was too stunned to speak. There was no room for doubt. My suspicion turned into a certainty. Fubuki had a stronger reading Steiner than most people, and remembered the other Worldline as a relatively realistic dream.
夢の中でその下山って人が言ってた。オカリンさんも私と同じで別の世界の記憶を持ってるんだって。
ああ。
それって本当だったんだ。
I hesitated for a moment, but then I gave her a brief explanation of my own reading Steiner ability. The one thing I wanted to make sure she understood was that her dreams weren't caused by an illness. But her reaction wasn't what I expected.
だったら他にもいるかも。病気じゃない人。
そうなのか？
暇だからみんなとね、よく話をするんだ。自分の見た夢の話。それがものすごくそっくりでびっくりすることがあって。ついさっきもね、隣の部屋に入院してる小学生の子が言ってた。ここで仲良くなった子なんだけど、一度も行ったことないはずなのに沖縄にいる夢を見たって。戦争で東京が燃えちゃって自衛隊に助けられて沖縄へ逃げる夢だったって。
そうか。
Oh no. If that was true, then it wasn't just Fubuki. There were other patients who were being kept in the hospital for no reason, who didn't have any kind of disease at all.
お医者さんに話した方がいい？
いや、とてもじゃないが信じてもらえるとは思えない。それどころか妄想がひどくなったって診断されたりでもしたら。
そっか。
他の人にもまだ黙っていた方がいい。騒ぎになったら大変だ。
And then Yuki poked her head through the curtain.
岡部さん、看護師さんがこっちに来ます。
面会時間おしまいですよ。
I looked at the clock. It was well past 8.
バタバタしちゃってごめんね、ふぶきちゃん。今度はゆっくりできるように早めに来るね。ああ、まゆし、言っちゃやだ。でもナースさんに怒られちゃうよ。そんなの別にいいよ。今夜は私と一緒に寝て。
Fubuki was back to her usual self. She grabbed Mayuri's hand and held it tight. Kai chuckled and forced her to let
なる
go.
べく来てあげるから。わがまま言っちゃダメ。なるべくじゃやだよ。明日も明後日も放課後になったら来て。暇で死んじゃう。
Fubuki flailed her arms and legs about. It was a bit too deliberate, if you ask me. Kai patted her on the head.
はいはい。それじゃあまたね。
Mary and Yuki went over to pat her too, and before long she looked like a little puppy in a kennel being petted. We left her behind and exited the room. I was the last to leave, and before I did, I turned around and saw Fubuki staring at us from the bed. Our eyes met, so I nodded a little. It's okay, you're not sick, so don't worry. I don't know if she understood what I meant, but she nodded back. The hospital halls were strangely silent after visiting hours were over. I checked my phone as I waited for the elevator. Something in that short message made me feel very tense. After I said my goodbyes to the others, I contacted Suzuha. She told me to come to the top of the radio building. When I arrived, she was standing silently on the dark roof. There was no trace of a smile on her face. Her eyes shone in the darkness, and as she glared at me, I felt a shiver run down my spine. This was not the Suzuha I was used to. Maybe this was her true self. Whatever she wanted to talk to me about, I was sure I wasn't going to like it.
悪かったね、オカリンおじさん。こんなところに呼び出しちゃって。
話ってなんだ？
あ、うん。私はなんていうか、話の駆け引きとか上手な情報の引き出し方とかそういうの苦手でさ。
From the way she stumbled over her words, it was clearly something she didn't want to talk about.
単刀直入に言ってくれ。以前のお前なら多分そうしていただろ
う。そうだね。
もしかして俺のこと気遣ってくれてるのか？そうか。ありがとう。別にそんなんじゃ。
Suzuha got a little annoyed and tried to say something back to me, but ended up swallowing her words.
実は俺、最初はちょっとショックだったんだ。お前が俺のよく知ってる鈴葉と全然違ったから。
それは仕方ない。世界線が違えば育った環境もそこで出来上がる人格や考え方も変わる。
ああ、でも今はそうは思わない。鈴葉はやっぱり鈴葉だよ。
いや、やっぱり私は違う。オカリンおじさんのよく知ってる天音鈴葉じゃない。
鈴葉。
今日私はオカリンおじさんを尾行したんだ。
尾行？
そう、病院の中までずっと。
What did she say? Why would she do that? No, I knew the answer without even asking. There was only one reason she would do something like that.
俺が世界線を移動したことに気づいたのか？
あのクリスマスの夜におじさんにリーディングシュタイナーが発動したんじゃないかとずっと疑ってたんだ。あの日だけじゃない、今日もだ。それで確信に変わったよ。
I deliberately avoided telling Suzuha that the Worldline had changed. It was obvious that she would react like this.
聞かせて。ここはもう前の世界線とは変わってしまったのか？
聞いてどうする？
いいから答えて。これは命令だ、岡部倫太郎。
I gulped as I saw her pull a gleaming pistol out from her jacket. It was aimed right between my eyes.
冗談だよな。
冗談でこんなことはしない。
Felt like Suzuha was trying to revert to who she was when I'd first come to the Beta Worldline, a woman who put her mission above everything else. She was so desperate it hurt to even look at her. What would happen if she shot me here? I imagined myself lying on the ground in a pool of blood. In my mind, the image overlapped with Kurisu's dead body. I closed my eyes and grit my teeth, trying to avoid a flashback. I'd spent the last month trying to escape to Okinawa in the middle of a war, but I still wasn't used to having a gun pointed right at me.
もう一度聞く。世界線は変動したのか？ここはもう以前とは違う世界なのか？
But Suzuha's hands were shaking a little as she held the gun. That would have been unimaginable when she'd first come here from the future. Maybe she was ashamed of it because she bit down on her teeth even harder. She must have bit her lip when she did so, because a single trail of blood ran down her jaw and dripped onto the ground. I stared at the blood as I answered.
大丈夫だ。俺たちは以前のままの世界線にいる。
本当に？
ああ。一度別の世界線に移動したのは事実だが、再び元に戻ったはずだ。
それをやったのは誰だ？ロシアか？
だと思
う。とうとうタイムマシンの実験を開始したってことか。
I nodded.
それなら
もう一刻の猶予もないじゃないか。連中が実験を続ければやがて取り返しのつかないことが起きる。シュタインズゲートに続く道が閉ざされてしまうかもしれない。私はバカだ。悩んでる場合じゃなかった。もう説得なんて終わりだ。
どうする気だ？
岡部倫太郎、私の命令に従ってもらう。一緒に7月28日に行くんだ。
拒否したら？
拒否なんてさせない。
お前はいいのか？それで
何？
この世界線をなかったことにしてしまって、それで
うるさい。
There was a horrible ringing in my ears and a fierce pain in my eardrums. A second later, the smell of gunpowder passed by my face. She really shot at me.
次は脅しじゃなくて当てる。
She was glaring at me as if she was about to cry. We stared at each other in silence. I tried as hard as I could to come up with something to calm her down, but nothing came to me. Nothing I could come up with that would get her to change her mind. What should I do?
Suzuha, Okarin, nani yatten da o?
Suddenly, I heard Daru's voice. I turned and saw that he'd just come out of the door near the stairs.
父さん、どうして？
マユシとアマネシからメールがあったんだ。なんか鈴葉がオカリンを呼び出したって言うからさ、嫌な予感がして探してたんだお。あと、差出人不明のメールがあった。
差出人不明？
この場所のマップの URL を送りつけられた。もしやと思って真っ先に来てみたわけ。そしたら銃声がしたからびっくりしたっつうの。
Daru's whole body was covered in sweat. Even as he spoke, large beads were appearing on his forehead. He must have really hurried.
で、鈴葉、その銃は何なん？
いや、鈴葉は別に何も。
何もなかったら銃なんて撃たないっしょ、上皇。ほら鈴葉、話してみるといいのだぜ。
父さんだって本当は分かってるくせに。
何が？
世界線が変動したことだよ。ロシアがタイムマシンの実験を始めたんだ。
それって確定なん？
だから焦ってるんじゃないか。このままじゃ何もかも終わりなんだ。シュタインズゲートに到達できない。第三次世界大戦も防げない。大勢の人が死んで、母さんも死んで、何もかも回避できない。
それは困るお。でもだからってさ、オカリンを脅して無理やり過去へ連れて行ったとして、それでうまくいくわけ
Daru's normally easygoing expression had suddenly turned serious.
タイムマシンや世界線のことを研究し始めて、なんとなく分かってきたんだよね。オカリンの言う通り、普通のやり方じゃ何度やってもマキセ氏の命を救うことなんてできないんじゃないかって。
父さんまで何を言って。
世界線のルールや因果率がそんな簡単に変えられるんなら、オカリンの言うアルファ世界線でマヤ氏の命だって救えたはずっしょ。
じゃあどうしたらいいって言うんだ。
Daru brought his fist up to his chest.
どうすべきかを僕らは研究してるわけっしょ。
でももう時間が。
大丈夫、僕に任せとけって。絶対に何とかしてみせる。たまには父さんの言うことも素直に聞いてほしいのだぜ。
Daru's voice was strong and kind in a way you never imagined he was capable of. He softly took the gun from Suzuha's hands. She didn't
ほら、
resist.
銃なんかよりもっと大切なものを忘れてる。今日みたいな寒い日にこそこれを使うべき。
Daru took something out of his pocket. He pressed it into Suzuha's hands. It was a pair of handmade gloves. It was the present that Yuki had given her at the Christmas party. I remembered it well.
私
When he gave her the gloves, warm tears started to flow down her face.
どうしていいのかわかんない。わかんなくなっちゃった。 助けて。父さん、助けて。お願い。
Suzuha's shoulders shook as the tears poured down. I turned my eyes towards the time machine, a silhouette in the darkness.
俺はもう乗らないって決めたんだ。
No matter what Daru said, no matter how Suzuha threatened me, I wasn't going back to the past. I can't look back. The next thing she knew, Suzuha was inside a time machine, wrapped up in a blanket. She must have been crying a lot, because she hadn't even noticed that she'd come inside the time machine, or that Rintarou had left. Her dad was next to her. He was also wrapped up in a blanket, and he was looking at her.
落ち着いた？
今何時？
She wiped away the tears as she asked.
もうすぐ日付が変わるよ。
ごめん、こんな時間まで付き合わせて。
平気平気。前にも言ったっしょ。父さんのこといくらでも頼っていいのだぜって。
The time machine's hatch was still open, and cold air was pouring in. Each time they spoke, they could see their breath turn white. The machine was still silent. They could use the life support system in the cockpit to keep out the cold, but she didn't want to waste the energy. She rubbed her cheeks with her glove-covered hands. The gloves Yuki gave her were very warm, and her hands were the one part of her that wasn't cold.
僕さ、いつか必ずオカリンも僕らと一緒に、いや違うな。僕らの先頭に立って指揮を取ってくれるって信じてるんだよね。
Suzuha was a little surprised to see Rintarou speaking seriously. Normally all Rintarou ever did was screw around.
未来ガジェット研究所はオカリンがいてこそだから今はちょっと腐ってるけどきっと立ち直る。同時に法王院京馬もよみがえるわけ。不死鳥の名は伊達じゃない的な中二病オツ的なその時が来たら多分オカリンは自分からタイムマシンに乗るよ。鈴葉に言われなくってもね。
Suzuha realized Rintarou was trying to make her feel better. Suddenly, deep in her heart, she felt a little warmer.
父さん、すごく恥ずかしいこと言ってるの自覚してる？
うわ、ですよね。オカリン本人の前じゃ口が裂けても言えないな。
私、明日までに手紙書くよ。オカリンおじさんに直接顔見て話すとまた変な感じになっちゃうから、ごめんなさいっていうのともうちょっとだけもがいてみるって。だからオカリンおじさんにも考えてみてほしいって。そうは言っても実はもうあんまり時間はないんだけど。
時間ないって？ロシアが実験を開始したから？
実はタイムマシンを制御してる量子コンピューターの内蔵電池もうすぐ切れそうなんだ。
マジ？
前に話したよね。かがりを探すために1998年から何度もマシンを使ったって。それは当初の計画にはなかった行動なんだ。当然マシンを制御するコンピューターの使用回数も予定より多くなって。
それでバッテリーが消耗したっつうことか。
マシンそのものの燃料よりそっちの方が深刻なんだよ。マシンを正確に制御してジャンプさせることが難しくなる。
バッテリーだったら交換とか充電とかすればいいんじゃね？
無理だよ。
ちょっとだけその内蔵電池見させてもらっていいかな？
Suzuha nodded and pointed to a piece at the core of the machine. Rintarou leaned his huge body forward to take a look, but soon he gave out a moan of confusion.
なんぞこれ。
The battery was the same size as a car's, but it was the product of 2036's technology, and Rintarou lived in the year 2010. There was probably no way he could understand it. From Rintarou's perspective, it might as well have been a black box of unknown technology. A quick look wouldn't tell him anything about how it was built or how it would work. That was one reason why Suzuha had agreed to let him look at it.
2010年の技術で何とかするのは無理だと思う。 言うなればそれは使い切りの電池と同じ状態ってこと。充電も交換もできない。
この時代のバッテリーか発電機に換装するのは
Suzuha shook her head helplessly.
とっくに試したよ。でも不可能だった。ルミ姉さんに頼んで車のバッテリーを用意してもらったんだ。トラックとかに積まれてる大きなやつ繋いでみたら1秒持たなかった。
なんだと？
ガソリンを使う発電機も試してみたけどそれもダメだった。ガソリンが何ガロン必要なのか見当もつかない。だいたいそんな量のガソリンマシンには積めないし、ルミ姉さんね、ものすごく無理をしてくれて最新の燃料電池まで手に入れてくれたんだよ。
But even that wasn't good enough.
未来の技術ってすげえのな。こんな小さなものがそんな大電力を賄ってるっつうわけ？
Rintarou was staring in amazement at the futuristic battery.
SF 映画みたく生ゴミを電気に変えられたらな。で、このバッテリーあとどれくらい持ちそうなん？
多分あと1回か2回ジャンプしたらそれで終わり。
たったそれだけ？
しかもこうやってマシンが停止してる間もさ、重力場や座標点の計測装置なんかはずっと動いてるから、ジャンプしなくてもいずれ電池切れになる。残ったバッテリーで正確なジャンプをするにはあと半年が限界だろうね。マキセ・クリスを救いに行けるタイミングもそこまでってことになる。
Suzuha grabbed onto Ataru's back and took a deep breath. It was squishy and it
バ
felt
ッテリ
good.
ーが切れてマシンのコントロールを失ったらどうなるんだろう。カーブラックホールの制御も効かなくなるし、イベントホライゾンの向こうから永遠に戻ってこられないとか。
縁起でもないこと言ったらダメだお。
ごめん。でもそこってさ、どんな場所なのかな。今みたいに静かな時間が永遠に続くのかな。だったらそれでもいいな。
As she clung to her father's warm back, Suzuha started to feel very sleepy. If she let her guard down for a moment, she was sure to fall asleep. She'd been trained to fight it on the battlefield, but this wasn't the battlefield, and she was exhausted from crying. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to let herself sleep once in a while. She sat down and held her knees like a child, then softly closed her eyes.
そっか。結局鈴葉はこの夏までに必ず行っちゃうんだな。たとえオカリンがどんな結論を出すとしても。
Just before she fell asleep, she thought she heard her father talking to himself.
これはまさにパラダイス。
Maho's eyes were shining like the little girls. Not many girls would look like that if you brought them to a place like this. I was the one who brought her here, but she seemed to have forgotten about me entirely. She was wandering down the narrow corridors where all the computer parts were, as if in a daze. Then she came to a stop in front of one of them. Inside the shop were lots of little plastic bins filled with junk parts of all sizes. They'd been taken off of discarded PCs and appliances. Each of them was obviously dirty, and lots of them were covered in dust.
これ一体何の基板かしら。まるで美術品みたいに美しいパターンをしているわ。しかもアルミナ基板だなんて。
ああ。
IFX008 イメージセンサーですって。信じられない。博物館にあってもおかしくないものがなんでこんなところに転がっているの。
おお。
秋葉原。歴史に勝る場所だわ。
Watching the ecstasy on Maho's face creeped me out a little. Kurisu spoke from inside my phone. Maho had said she wanted to go out with Kurisu today. And so I ended up going on a strange date with 2 girls at once. This might be another test of Amadeus' capabilities.
俺もここは何度か来たことがあるが、あんな顔してパーツをめでる人間にはこれまで一人しかお目にかかったことがない。
分かった。橋田さんのことでしょ。
ああ、
さすがにあの人と同類扱いするのは先輩がかわいそうよ。あんたの話を聞く限りだと橋田さんってとんでもない変態だから。
そうだな。ヒヤジョーさんに失礼だった。
It was early afternoon on a Sunday. There was a reason I'd come with Maho to the computer parts shop. Dr. Leskman and Maho were heading back to America in a few days. She was leaving soon, so she wanted me to show her around Akihabara like I promised. That's what her message said. So we met in front of the station in the morning, and I asked her where she wanted to go. This was the result. By the way, our first stop was Yodobashi, and our second, soft map, I'd already taken her to a lot of used PC and retro PC shops tucked away in tiny alleys.
ヒヤジョーさんはこういうパーツが好きなのか。
パーツというか組み立てるものが好きなのね。子供の頃は日本製のプラスチックモデルをよく作ったわ。ゲルマニウムラジオなんかも組み立てた口ですか。ハンダ付けでよくやけどをしたものよ。私もです。みんな同じなのね。
Probably not everybody. Actually, I'd assume that it was a minority of people who soldered in their homes growing up.
ずっと見ていたい。どうして私もっと早くここに来なかったのかしら。
It felt like she was never going to leave unless I dragged her out. I finally managed to succeed in getting her away from the parts shop by telling her it was time to eat. We went out to the main road. This area was close to the station, so it was especially crowded. Thanks to the crowds of people waiting to cross the street, you couldn't even walk in a straight line. Now then, where to eat? My first idea was make Queen Nun squared, but after the way she reacted last time, it was probably best to avoid it. Still, Sampo wasn't a good choice for someone new to Akihabara. Gensen or maybe Kitchen Jiro? Gogo Curry would work too. As I stood there thinking, Maho stopped moving in front of the arcade directly ahead of us. Evidently, she was looking at the crane games on the first floor.
ちょっとだけ覗いてみてもいいかしら。
I nodded. Maho walked up to the crane game and pressed her face against the glass like a little kid. Inside the glass were characters from at-channel memes, all of different sizes. Maybe Maho was a secret at-channeler like Kurisu. They were pretty close, so it was possible. I leaned over to Maho and whispered a magic spell into her ear.
ヌルポ。
はい。
I just confused her.
何そのぬるっていうのは。
なんでもない。忘れてくれ。
Kurisu was glaring cold daggers at me from inside the smartphone, but I decided to ignore it.
ヒヤジョーさん、そのぬいぐるみ欲しいの？
ええ、可愛いじゃない。ねえクリス。先輩？何？どうして慌てているの？なんでもないです。
ちょっと意外だな。さっきパーツが好きって言ってたから、感性としては男に近いのかもって思ってた。
岡部、デリカシーないわね、あんたは。もっとうまいこと言いなさいよ。ギャップが素敵だとかなんとか。
あ、すまない。
いいわよ、別に。実はね、このぬいぐるみ、クリスがベッドルームに置いていたのよ。
そうなのか？
先輩！
もしかして通販か何かでアメリカまで取り寄せてたのか？
別にどうだっていいでしょ。
さすが隠れアットチャンネラーだな。
何よ、アットチャンネラーって聞いたことない。
ヌルポ。
Even as part of Amadeus, she hadn't changed a bit.
ヒヤジョーさん、クリスはこれがなんていうキャラなのか教えてくれたか？
いいえ、何度か聞いてみたけど永遠とはぐらかされたわ。
だろうな。
だからずっと気になっていたのよ。岡部さんは知っているの？
まあ。
A chill ran down my spine as I heard the angry voice from the smartphone.
俺も知らないんだ。
そう。
Sheesh. I defended your honor, Kurisu. You better be
ちょっと
grateful.
挑戦していいかしら。
Maho took her wallet out of her pocket and put a 100 yen coin into the machine.
このアームを左右と前後に操作してぬいぐるみをつかめばいいのね。
もしかして初めてなのか。
真帆先輩はレースゲームしかやらないですもんね。そういうこと。
Maho nodded and pushed the control button. Managing to move the arm directly over her target, she smiled, satisfied.
簡単なものね。あとはアームが降りて勝手に掴んでくれるんでしょ。
あ、いや、普通はそうなんだが。
The arm went straight for the doll, but the angle was slightly off, and it didn't grab it right.
おかしいわ。どういうことなの？
That's what happens your first time. Maho gave it several more tries, but didn't seem to get the hang of it. She groaned and took her last 300 yen to the back of the arcade. She walked over to a game with a red and white two-tone Formula One car on the side of the cabinet. She slid inside, still angry. I remembered that one was a CG racing game based off of real circuits.
なんだ？
ここは男らしさを見せるところよ。
男らしさ？
先輩の代わりにあんたがぬいぐるみを手に入れなさいということ。
ああ、なるほど。
And then give it to Maho, was what she was trying to say. Manliness aside, after seeing how badly she wanted it, I did want to try and help her. I took some coins out of my pocket and checked how much money I was carrying. Okay, it's been a while, but let's try this.
とはいえ、俺もこういうゲームは得意じゃないんだが。
Even so, I was sure I could do better than Maho. May as well give it a try. Oh. And so, after trying several times, whether it was luck or skill, I managed to get the stuffed animal easier than I'd expected.
よし。
I stuffed it into a bag and went back to the racing game Maho was playing. For some reason, there was a crowd of about 10 people around it.
あの子何者だよ。
俺に聞くなんて。
小学生か？ありえないテクだぞ。これレコード出るんじゃね？
The crowd was whispering to one another. All of them seemed to be amazed. I made my way into the crowd and looked back at the screen. The game Maho was playing was one of those where you had to clear each stage in a set time, or else it would be game over. With each race, the course got more and more difficult, and she was placing first every time with ease. As the crowd watched in awe, she finally made it to the end of the last stage, well ahead of the other racers, and she set a new record. She had a satisfied smile on her face as she looked at the flashy "Congratulations" graphic on the ending screen. Then she noticed the crowd around her and her body jerked.
おめでとうございます当店のベストレコードです
Oh. An arcade employee walked over to Maho and started to clap. Then the crowd started to clap as well. What? Yay! Maho's face went beet red. I should probably help her. Hey! Yay! I pushed my way through the crowd and grabbed her hand to pull her up. I'd never seen her this obedient before. We made our way through the hustle and bustle and finally got out of the arcade. Maho sighed in relief.
うかつだったわ。
何が？
つい熱くなってしまって本気を出してしまったの。
これのせいか？
I handed her the bag with my prize in it.
何？
She opened the bag and took out the stuffed animal.
これト
運が良くてね。君にプレゼントするよ。
いいの？
俺が持ってても仕方ない。
そうじゃあ遠慮なくいただくわ。
Aw. Maho hugged the doll tight to her chest with the innocent smile of a child. Seeing how happy she was made me happy too.
クリスが亡くなった後ね、お母さんから形見をいろいろともらったわ。けどこれはクリスがとても可愛がっていたからってお母さん自分のベッドルームに飾っていたのよ。
If you didn't know it was from an at-channel meme, it was actually pretty cute. I could see her keeping it as a memory of her daughter.
だけどクリスの実家がね、ああいうことになってぬいぐるみも燃えてしまったと思うの、きっと。先輩だからこれはアメリカのお母さんにプレゼントしていいかしら。
もちろん喜んでもらえるならそれが一番いい。
ありがとう。
さてと次はどうする？他に見てみたいところはあるか？と言ってもアニメやゲームのショップなんかは興味ないよな。
クリス悪いけどしばらく岡部さんと二人きりにしてくれる？
先輩、ついに自分の気持ちに素直になることにしたんですね。岡部、ちゃんとしなさいよ。
はあ？
先輩、頑張って。それじゃあ。
冷や城さん？
行きたい場所もう一つあるんだけれど。
そうか。どこだ？
Is it someplace you didn't want Kurisu knowing about?
あそこよ。わかるでしょ？
The smile was gone from Maho's face. She looked like she'd come to some kind of decision. And then I realized where she wanted to go.
ラジカンに連れて行って。
The radio building. And she wanted me to take her there. I understood immediately. Because that was where Kurisu Makisea died. I'd gone up to the roof several times since then. The time machine was there, and Suzuha and Daru would go up once in a while to do maintenance. Just a few days ago, Suzuha had called me out there and pointed a gun in my face. But even so, I'd never been to that storeroom on the 8th floor where it had happened. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Just remembering what happened was enough to cause a severe flashback. There was no way I could visit the site of her death.
大丈夫？ずいぶん顔色が悪いけれど。クリスのこと思い出してしまうの？
そうだろうな。
辛いならついてこなくてもいいわ。私一人で行くから。
But her face was colorless. Going there had to be hard on her too. But even so, she was trying to come to grips with Kurisu's death. I wanted to help her remember our friend. The radio building was going to be renovated. There wasn't a lot of time.
いや、一緒に行くよ。
Half of the shops had already been moved to another building to make way for the renovation. But many of the shops on the 7th floor were still open. 6 months ago, on July 28th, I killed Kurisu on the floor just above where I was standing, with my own hands.
ここなの？
いや、事件があったのはこの上の階だと聞いている。
I wasn't supposed to have been at the scene of Kurisu's death. I'd already asked Mayuri and Daru not to tell anyone.
上には何が？
イベント会場と、あとは倉庫とかになってる。
行ってみてもいいのかしら？
今は立ち入り禁止のはず。
But the rope that always blocked off the way to the 8th floor wasn't there today. I could hear loud voices and laughter from above. Since it was a day off, there must have been some kind of event going on upstairs.
大丈夫そうね。
Maho headed up the stairs first. I slowly dragged myself up the stairs. We passed by the event hall and into the back. It looked like there was no one around. Nothing had changed in 6 months.
ここだ。
There were no lights on, and the place seemed dark and lonely. This time the storeroom was locked.
そうこんな場所で
I could see her lips trembling as she whispered. It seemed strange. This was the place where Kurisu had died, covered in blood, and yet, nearby, the rest of the world continued on like it didn't care. And now I'd come back, even though this was where the one I loved had died.
もどかしいわ。私は物理学者ではないから相対性理論のことを詳細に理解しているわけではないけれど、時間と空間が同列だというのなら、なぜ空間と同じように時間も容易に移動できないのかしらね。今私たちは空間的にはクリスの死と同じ軸上にいるのよ。なのに時間軸がほんの少しずれているというだけで手出しすることすら叶わない。あなたこの前クリスにアマデウスの方だけど面白い質問をしたわよね。タイムマシンは作れるかどうかって。
あ
あ、ぜひ研究してみてほしいわ。真っ先に私が友人テストに名乗り出るから。
I couldn't tell from the tone of her voice if she was serious or joking. She laughed sadly. Time machines are real, you know, and there's one right above us. What would she do if I told her that? Would she blame me for giving up on saving Kurisu and say she'd go back to the past herself?
岡部さん、クリスが亡くなった時の状況について教えてくれない？私、詳しくは知らないの。
俺だってろくに知らないよ。前にそう話さなかったか？
でもアメリカにいた私よりは詳しいでしょ。クリスはどうしてこんなところに来たのかしら。クリスが死んだ時、すぐそこのイベントホールでは今日みたいにイベントが行われていたそうね。
We could hear the occasional sounds of laughter coming from the event hall.
中鉢博士、去年の夏ニュースになった。ロシアに亡命してタイムマシンに関する論文を書いたって。その論文の内容はそれはひどいものだったらしいけれど、ただそれでピンときたのよ。アメリカのクリスの家に放火した連中もロシア語を話していた。これ偶然かしら。私は何らかの関連性があると思う。だから中鉢博士について調べようと思ったんだけど、不思議なことに驚くほど情報がないのよ。ネットで検索しても本名すら出てこない。中鉢博士について言及しているブログやサイトを見に行ってもほとんどは閉鎖してるわ。しかもこの半年ほどで立て続けに。ねえ、一体クリスの周りで何が起きていたの？もしかして今もまだそれは続いているの？あなたは何を隠しているの？
Her eyes were pure and sought the truth. Kurisu used to get that exact same look in her eyes all the time, but
好奇心で足を突っ込まない方がいい。俺はもうたくさんだ。
今更だわ。私は片足を突っ込んでしまっているのよ。それに考えてしまうのよ。この前襲われたのももしかすると私のせいじゃないかって。
君のせい？狙われる理由があるのか？
私は。
And then she paused for a moment.
私はクリスの遺産を持っている。
Belongings. Some of Kurisu's belongings? What did she mean? Maho had said that after Kurisu died, she'd gone to her home in America and received some of her belongings from her mom. Was she saying now that the attack was because of that? My mind began to race. Russia, where Dr. Nakabashi had sought asylum. The people who attacked Kurisu's home spoke Russian. and just a few days ago the Russians, probably, had experimented with changing the past. Suzuha had said that World War III would be set off by the time machine. The time machine. Nakabachi's paper. The paper he'd written about the time machine, the cause of the Third World War, a miraculous nightmarish paper which would cause the deaths of 5.7 billion people. The time machine he discussed at his press conference was a ripoff of John Titor's. But the one in his paper was different. I'd never managed to read it though. But my guess was what Kurisu had showed him, the original that she'd written on July 28th, and his paper was an inferior copy. Kurisu had written down instructions for making a time machine. I shuddered. I quickly booted up the Rhyme program on my smartphone. Paged through my chat logs. That hard drive in that laptop contained the data for the original version of Nakabachi's paper, maybe Kurisu's paper.
ダールのところに持ち込まれたクリスのノート PC とハードディスク。まさかあれの解析を依頼したのは。
I looked at Maho. She looked back at me without smiling. And she nodded.
ええ、私よ。
From Maho's perspective, there were too many things about Kurisu's death that didn't make sense. Maybe that was why she had decided to look into why Kurisu was killed. Of course, she'd assumed there were hints hidden inside her laptop and hard drive. But if my hypothesis was right, that laptop was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. It was Pandora's box with the power to unleash the Third World War.
どうして隠していた？
最初はあなたと橋田さんの関係を知らなかった。橋田さんに頼んだのは本当に偶然よ。そしてあなたはクリスのことについて何か隠しているように思えた。そんなあなたに正直に全て話せるわけないでしょ。信用していないというわけではないのだけど、クリスのことについては慎重になった方がいいと思って。
ああ、それについては正解だよ。アマデウスのテスターになることを反対しなかったのもそういう打算があってのことか。
打算なんて言わないで。私はただクリスの友達であるあなたのことをもっと知りたかった。
クリスの秘密を手に入れるために
あの子のことをもっと知りたかったのよ。
She glared right back as if challenging me.
ダルはもう解析したのか？
まだよ。だからアメリカに帰る前に最後にもう一度あなたと話をしようと思ったの。
So that's why she brought me here? I need to call Dara right now. Whoa.
はい、もしもーし。
今ラボにいるか？
いや、
じゃあどこにいる？
家で絶賛エロゲ中。どうかしたん？
お前の裏のバイトの件で話がしたい。
あ、あれか。なんかマキセ氏の情報を思い出した？
ああ。
Of course, that was a lie. He could be in danger if I didn't get that laptop back right now. I glanced over at Maho.
じゃあさ、LINE で送ってもらえるかな？
直接会って話をしよう。ラボで合流できないか？
今手が離せないから夕方でもいい？
エロゲなんて後でいくらでもできるだろう。
さあせん、家でエロゲしてるってのは嘘。実は今バイト中で手が離せないんだよね。
バイト？
Well, I was lying to him too, so I didn't really have room to talk.
じゃあ本当はどこにいる？手が離せないならこっちから行く。とにかく今すぐに話したい。
あんまオカリンには教えたくなかったんだけどな。やばげな仕事も多いから。まあいいや。わかった。これから言うところに来てよ。
The location he gave me was still in Akihabara. It was less than 5 minutes away. Oh. Interesting. Hey. Bye!